All right, so a friend of mine just sent me a link that Obama just compared the current state of the United States to the Weimar Republic in Germany and compared Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. And it seemed to have just, gone completely under the radar. I haven't seen it really reported anywhere, probably because, you know, the media had a tendency during his 8 entire years of shielding him from any real criticism, toward his policies mostly, but also towards the ridiculous things he would say. But, I remember during the 8 years of George W. Bush, Saturday Night Live would just rail on him and make fun of him for basically anything. But what's ridiculous about it is just the total lack of self awareness. The conditions that he's talking about, comparing us to the Weimar Republic, he was the one that presided over that for the last 8 years. So, talking about the mass joblessness, the despair, and, the Weimar Republic also had, a lot of people going hungry and an extremely high rate of suicide. He's responsible for all of that economic misery, you know. Not to mention, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And I remember in 2008, if by the time I become president we have not ended this war, it will be the first thing I do. I will bring our troops home and I will put an end to this war, and you can take that to the bank. And of course, he expanded the war because that's what presidents do, where we do whatever the American Israeli Political Action Committee tells us to do, because American politicians require their support, because if they don't have their support, then APAC will bankroll their opposition and have them destroyed in the next primary. So I don't know why he would even think of doing that, because all it does is point out what a terrible job he did as president. And, you know, as bad as some people say that Donald Trump is, you would think that he was literally the Antichrist, or, they're comparing him to Hitler just like Obama did. And they just make these accusations hoping to uh, reach people emotionally, to pull on your heartstrings and say, well, you can't support Hitler. Well, what do you support, Adolf Hitler? No, of course not. So you can't support Trump. And that's their argument. They can't use facts or explain why exactly Donald Trump is bad. They can't cite X or Y economic or social policy is bad. And they never explain why leftist ideals are better. You'll never, you'll hear slogans like diversity is our strength, but you'll never see them explain how exactly diversity strengthens us. You look in Europe right now, and was it hundreds of thousands of little girls are being abused by these child grooming gangs, this new phenomenon that diversity has brought Europe. And, what is it about diversity that is so good? It's so incredible that it makes up for that, you know? And of course, the leftist response is to just ignore it. And if you do bring it up, it's only because you're hateful. They act as if, these child grooming gangs and these horrific, physical and sexual assault against women are just like growing pains towards this wonderful vision, this almost Star Trek vision of diversity that they have in their heads. And it's just never going to work that way, because they have no intention of assimilating. They say it. I've seen the videos from the different imams and the different Muslims preaching and bragging about how our birth rate is so drastically low, and you know, Allah has commanded that they come and replace us demographically, and telling them to sleep with our women, and just to do whatever they can to exterminate Europeans out of Europe, and to do the same in North America if they get the chance. And leftists, they want to keep this image in people's heads that third world immigrants are these, you know, all these diamonds in the rough. Like, yes, they come from absolute hellholes, but if they were just given the chance, then they would become the next brain surgeons. They would do all these wonderful things to enrich our country. But in reality, they come here and they immediately get on Section 8 housing, EBT food stamps, additional child tax credit, child support, cash assistance. And I don't know how they pull it off, but there's illegals, not just, regular immigrants, but there's also illegals that are getting Social Security disability, even though, they've never worked a single job here in their lives. So they haven't put any credits into the Social Security system, but yet they're getting Social Security. And it's so obvious that the, you know, the goal here is to set up a situation that all they have to do is sit around in government housing and just breed and breed and breed more far left Marxist leaning voters to replace us, so that they can just perpetually win and have their far left communistic government in perpetuity. That's what and that's what the Coudenhove Kalergi whatever plan is in Europe. The EU architects, they were openly making a plan to replace Europeans with third world people, and they even give the Coudenhove award to politicians like Angela Merkel, who they see as, doing some major steps towards fulfilling this plan of wiping out the European race. And of course, they never paint diversity as, negative, and a plan to exterminate Europeans. It's just this giant coincidence that if, white European people were to move in any large number to the third world, it would be condemned as colonialism and imperialism. But when they come into our countries, it's given this positive sounding, happy sounding vocabulary like diversity and multiculturalism. And, that's just the type of emotionalism that I'm talking about when I say that, all of the leftist arguments are purely emotional. That's what I mean by that, is, they just, say things that just, are like a childlike view of the world. Everybody should be nice to everybody. Everybody should have everything. Everything should be free. And of course, that sounds nice. Like, how can you be against that? How can you be against being nice to people? What are you, some kind of hate monger? It's like, no, we just know that we don't have enough wealth and resources to do this. We have our own army of unemployed in the United States, you know, and then you got politicians like Bernie Sanders. When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor. And it's like, okay, yeah, white people have never struggled. We don't have homeless white people. All white people, are living in gated communities, in ivory towers. That's just those are, first of all, those are racist stereotypes, which I don't care. But if you're going to use leftist logic, saying something disparaging about a race is bad. But if you say something bad against whites, well, that's an exception, because disparaging whites is the currently sanctioned and authorized racial disparagement that you're allowed to take part in. And like it's like you'll hear them say, okay, so yeah, some of them are committing crimes, but you can't lump all of them up into that category just because some are doing bad things, but yet they have no problem blaming all whites for slavery or blaming all whites for colonialism, you know, attacking us for trying to bring thousands of miles of roads and electrical and running water infrastructure to the third world, calling us evil for doing that. But what are they bringing into our countries? Are they bringing anything that can even compare to that? Like, are they, jumping us ahead centuries in our infrastructure and way of living? No, they're coming here and they're immediately getting on welfare, every kind of welfare. They even have groups like La Raza and the NAACP that work with them and help them apply to get as much welfare as possible. So it's just it's a total, I mean, they're not delusional. They know that what they're pushing is totally destructive. And when pressed and you finally corner a leftist Marxist, then they'll drop the mask and they'll say, yes, it is destructive, but whites deserve it. And then all of a sudden their nonsense about brotherhood and equality goes out the window, and the truth is revealed, and that it's just this grand plan for revenge against whites, and that if only we were out of the way, then they would have their amazing society that would reach towards the stars and bring the wonders of the good side of humanity to the galaxy. Like that's how they think. But yet, in every single country around the world where they're successful and they have their red revolution, like in Cuba or Venezuela or China, you know, it all begins with questions like, how do we provide health care to all the people? How do we provide free higher level education to all the people? And then 15 minutes later, it's, how do we stop the mass starvations? How do we stop masses of people trying to flee the country at the rate of a small town per day? And then they start building their massive minefields and sniper towers like in North Korea, trying to prevent people from getting the hell out of there because it's so absolutely terrible and miserable. But that's what leftist ideas, that's the inevitable conclusion towards leftist ideas, is mass starvation and a miserable society where everybody's just a prisoner in their own homes because there is absolutely no sense of community. Because how do you build any kind of community when you don't even speak the same language as your neighbors? Like how can you build any kind of relationship in that type of Tower of Babel situation? Which of course is that's the lesson of the Tower of Babel, not to sidetrack, but by trying to be king of everybody or whatever, God made everybody speak a different language, so they couldn't communicate anymore. That was their punishment for not staying within their own tribe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I remember from that fable, that religious fable. But yeah, going back to the original point on Obama, you know calling us, the United States, the Weimar Republic that's about to give rise to Adolf Hitler. First of all, you were the one that was president for 8 years during that economic misery, and all you did was blame George W. Bush. It's like, okay, blame Bush, but you did not reverse any of George Bush's policies. You didn't end the war, like, take that to the bank, like your big campaign promise in 2008. You didn't end the war. You didn't shut down Guantanamo. There was no transparency. You know, you you increased the size and scope of things like the NSA massively, except instead of watching foreigners and terrorist groups, you just turn them against Americans to watch what we're doing because you're so paranoid and delusional about one day Americans waking up to the fact that diversity is miserable and becoming reactionary just like they are in Europe right now. Like they elected that oh, that guy, I forget his name, but the prime minister of Italy right now. Um, let me get his name. This won't just take a second. Matteo Salvini, and Brazil just elected that, far right, almost military, government. And if I'm not mistaken, Slovakia, Finland, Hungary, Poland, the EU is falling apart because and they only have themselves to blame because leftists have been so absolutely fanatical in pushing their diversity and their economic socialism, and that they've been willing to do almost anything to crush any dissent and create an atmosphere where in some countries it's against the law to disagree with the far left, on immigration. Like there's, those poor Swedes are going to jail for Facebook posts, and there's Brits that are going to jail for their social media posts. And people look at that, and they're saying to themselves, these leftists are crazy. They all talk about, brotherhood and tolerance and diversity, but they're all little Stalins. And people are so afraid of leftists having any kind of power that it's going to be a recreation of the Bolshevik dictatorship in Russia, where, you go to the gulag for, making an anti-communist joke in the grocery store. You're sentenced to 25 years hard labor. And that's and people are responding to that by going back to the far right because with the far right, things might get a little a little bit of a tight squeeze. But once the far right fixes things, like in Franco Spain, you know, once they get the economy back on track after cleaning up the mess that, leftists have made, things calm down, like the Franco government calmed down. And that's the problem is, leftists have gotten things so horribly bad that we need to look to the far right nationalist leaders to fix it, because that's the only solution to these problems. Like, you're not going to get any leftists to admit that, you know, maybe diversity isn't 100% good. Like, they're so dogmatic and fanatical that they refuse to admit that mass diversity has done anything negative, that it's had any negative impact. They'll just say things like, "Oh, whites commit those crimes, those kinds of crimes too," and we're not denying that, but we're saying that there's ratios involved. Like, X race is 13% of the population in the United States, but yet X race commits over 50% of the homicides. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. And it's ridiculous because the like, if you look at the FBI's website and you look at their list of most wanted, you'll see that, like, Hispanics, Turks, Indians, they're all listed as white. The only racial differences are white, black, and Asian. If you don't fit specifically as Asian or black, they mark you as white. And that's how they've been able to doctor crime statistics, because the truth is whites commit such few, like, hardcore violent crimes that if they were to ever release the real statistics, Americans would instantly, uh, react to that and say, cut this crap out, you know, hurry up and build the wall and deport the ones that are here. We're tired of this, and the some old European cities, they haven't seen a violent crime or a rape, and some of them in over 50 years. And now there's gang rapes and pedophiles crawling all over their cities and towns because of people like Merkel and their lunatic, religiously fanatic, almost, uh, you know, zealot behavior towards, pushing diversity. All right, but that's basically all I wanted to say. I know I kind of went here and there about it, but that's just how ridiculous they are. Everybody I do not like is Hitler. And, I don't even have the capability to, be cognizant of the fact that I was president, for the past 8 years before Trump. And if there's anybody to blame for the Weimar like conditions, it's me. Obama's just totally clueless, I guess. But, he was probably just given something to say because, he was the teleprompter president. He couldn't go anywhere without being told what to say by, George Soros, who was probably the actual president for 8 years. But all right, that's all she wrote. Take care.